Chimps made Sonic Advance in the following year, and the game was actually a good success, probably because it was released on the GBA and Game Boy. Is much better than the Sega handhelds or the Neo Geo Pocket, so it actually was able to make sales. Wait, everyone had a Neo Geo Pocket, right? No one did. Maybe like two people had it because it only lasted like 2 years. The GBA was a big console. Of course, it was one of the only main handled consoles coming in 2000 until the PSP was launched and a little later. So they decided to develop a sequel for the game in February 2002 is when it started, and they had a large group of less than or more than 10 people. That's the exact estimate. So no a lot of people, and the game had to be finished by a certain date, which was September 2002. So they only had 8 months to complete it. However, it wasn't that difficult a process since they had developed the engine in the previous game, so they were actually able to refine some elements of that. They're able to make new graphic sets, making Sonic and friends have way more animation than before, as well as making him go a lot faster, which meant that they were making the levels a lot bigger, which kind of changed the gameplay a bit. We have a new style of gameplay, even though it's mostly the same, but it's also different with the level design, as well as a new trick system. We're going to get all into that when we get to the gameplay. The game was showed off and introduced a brand new character, a character that was not designed for Sonic Advance 2, but for the following mainline Sonic Team game, Sonic Heroes. The new character introduced in this game that was intended for Sonic Heroes was Cream the Rabbit. She was basically the flight character for the Team Rose. Essentially, they wanted like Amy to have a Tails-like character, which is what she was based off of, just to make her stand out, I guess, a bit more. So they designed the character Cream to be the most friendly to newcomers ever, and they put that character in Sonic Advance 2 since it was pretty much already finalized at that point. You can see some of the design elements in the left, which don't look as good as the one on the right. There could be different types of animals there, and they end up going for Rabbit. Now, Cream is a pretty interesting character since she's never alone. She always has a chow flying with her called Cheese, Cream and Cheese. Yeah, lovely. And her ability is that she can fly. How does she fly? She's a rabbit. Rabbits can't fly. Well, she has long ears, and she uses those ears to flap through the air. This character, of course, would become a fan favorite, actually. And despite that, Sega would stop using her for a period of time for like no reason until I think very recently, like Sonic Dream Team, and that's just like the last game that came out. But yeah, this character during this period of time could be used a lot, and most fans like her. I don't really know much people who don't. She's pretty adorable. Yeah, Cream always has a Chow flying with her, known as Cheese the Chow. And Cheese is just a regular looking Chow, but he's got a bow tie. And yeah, Cheese basically is the one that does all the dirty work for Cream. She just goes out and just beats up robots for her with a point of a finger. You can see that in gameplay. There's nothing else really to say about Cheese. He's just a Chow, and who doesn't love Chow? Cream also has a mom, which is kind of rare in the Sonic universe to actually have a family member. She's like the only official one, other than Eggman's family. But yeah, one of the Sonic characters, Cream has a mom, and her name is Vanilla. Yeah, Cream Vanilla, Vanilla Cream. She's barely appears in any of the games, though she does appear in Sonic Advance 2. She mostly appears in external media, to be honest. So you won't see a lot. She's never playable. She only appears in brief appearances in Sonic Advance 2, 3, and Rush, and nowhere else. So don't expect to see this character a lot unless you're reading external media. She's pretty basic. She looks like Cream, but with a purple dress. And yeah, apparently in Sonic X, she has a thing for Vector the Crocodile because I guess she likes that croc cock. So Sonic has a couple new moves in this game. You press the B button in the air, or B button on the ground, you do two new moves. So B button in the air, you do your bounce attack from Sonic Adventure 2, which is nowhere near as useful as there because it slows you down quite significantly, as well as the somersault on the ground. Both these moves you're probably pretty much never going to use. In fact, I never use them because there's better options for them because you can roll in the ball and stuff like that. Plus, if you got ramps, you can do trick attacks, and as well as you can use your once again your Insta Shield, which is nice. There are tons of other moves that Sonic can do. Most of them really aren't that useful. You'll find yourself using very rarely. You'll use the trick option, especially the forward upward one, most of the time because they're very useful. But yeah, the balance attack or the somersault you won't use, and some of them you probably don't even know unless you look up the manual. Which I do have the manual, oddly enough. I had when I bought the game, it came with the manual and not the box. Yeah, I bought this game later, obviously. Anyway, so say for example, you have your Insta Shield, which I always love, but sometimes if you do it, you'll do a homing attack if you're near an enemy, which there actually isn't a whole lot of enemies in this game because of the way the level designs are worked out. If you double tap in the air, you can kind of move forward, but it's also kind of useless because the way you have to do it doesn't really work that well. And yeah, that's just some weird things that Sonic can do. This ability is mostly used for the boss fights, since there's not a whole lot of enemies in this game, and the boss fights are pretty annoying, but we'll get to them when we get to them. But you press the B button, and when your item, your Chow will hit it. This actually makes some bosses fights a lot easier, especially since these boss fights are actually quite challenging, at least in my opinion. This is a very useful attack. We do have a new character here, being Cream the Rabbit, so let's go over her, since she is the first character you unlock. Yes, unlike Sonic Advance 1, where you can play as any character at any time you want beginning the game, in Sonic Advance 2, you had to unlock all characters, so you unlock them for the story mode. There isn't much of a story in Sonic Advance 2, we'll go over that a little later. Anyway, Cream mostly moves similar to Sonic. She has some of the most abilities, spin dash, the ability to do tricks and stuff. All every character does that, as well as being able to grind on rails. There's a lot more rails, and every character can grind them, unlike just in Sonic Advance 1, where only Sonic could do it. And of course, she can fly, like Tails can do. She also has unique abilities. For example, if we press the B button, she'll do a Chow attack. Sonic Advance 2 also requires you to play as every character in order to complete the game, much like Sonic Advance 1, even if the gameplay is basically the same thing. However, if you do get Cream locked early, I recommend playing the whole game as her, because she is a lot easier, and this game is quite challenging, at least in my opinion. It's one of the harder Sonic games. Not in a dickish way, but yeah, it can be annoying. And Cream is just a fun character to play as, and she really helps out with her flight ability as well as her Chow ability to make those annoying bosses easier. Of course, we can also play as Tails, Sonic's two-tailed best friend. He has pretty much all the same moves he's had previously, though this time he has a tail attack, which actually had before, and yeah, he has no new moves actually, other than the fact that you can do grinding as well as the tricks like every other character in the game. His flying is not as good as Cream's. It works the same as it did before, but Cream's flying is a lot more smooth, and you can even stop on a dime if you want, unlike Tails. But yeah, Tails is still the same old character we've seen before multiple times already. We also have Knuckly Knuckles. Knuckles has all the same moves. You can glide, you can climb on walls. He has his punch attack as well from Sonic Adventure 2, as well as his drill claw, also from Sonic Adventure 2. I know the drill claw was kind of in Sonic Adventure 1, but the way it dives into the ground, Knuckles can do that now. But overall, nothing is too that important to do here compared to other games. So he doesn't really have anything that new or interesting to deal with. But hey, he does have some neat moves to play if you like Knuckles. You can unlock Amy, but in order to do that, you actually have to beat the game 100%. She has similar moves that she did in Sonic Advance 1, but it's mostly it's taken from Sonic. She does the Amy dash now, instead of the jump during the spin dash, and she can do a hammer attack, much like the Insta Shield when you do double tap the A button. And she's missing a lot of things. B, she can do a basic hammer attack, and downward she can do a mid-air hammer swing, which we've seen before. And that's about it. A lot of her unique movesets are gone in this game, which sucks, especially since you can only play her at the very end. Amy got the short end of the stick in this game. She's not part of the story or anything like that. She's just an unlockable character at the very end. Wah, wah. So what's the story? Well, Eggman's up to his old scheme again, kidnapping animals, putting them into robots, and this time he's kidnapped Tails and Knuckles, as well as a new character known as Cream the Rabbit. And yeah, he's trapped them all. Apparently, he must have mind controlled Knuckles, I guess, to do his bidding at one point, but not that it really matters. The story isn't that well defined, and Sonic's got to save them all. So let's see, can he save them, or will he fail? Well, he obviously succeeds, but let's see the journey. But before we do that, we got to go over one of the things that makes this game kind of annoying, is that collecting the 7 Chaos Emeralds can be a pain in the fucking ass. Essentially, in each level, you'll find 7 coins. Now, keep in mind, these levels are not designed around, exploring the level, about going as fast as possible. So, in order to do that, you have to backtrack and do a lot of weird maneuvers that aren't as well suited for it. It seems like something like all the red rings from future Sonic games, collectible-wise. That's where their placements are alike. But no, you have to go out your way and figure it out, and you have to collect all 7 of them, because if you don't collect all 7 of them, you cannot get to the special stage. Really bad level design, in my honest opinion, especially since even the red rings are easier to collect in one run than these are, and those are just meant to go back and forth for all those. Here, you have to go find them, and unless you have a guide, you're not going to be able to find them in one go, especially since you can't really backtrack in these levels, especially with Sonic himself. Once you do that, at the end of the stage, you'll get a special stage where you'll be in a 3D environment. It's definitely better than it was in Sonic Advance 1, which had terrible depth perception, but getting here is what the main trouble is. Yeah, I collect a certain amount of rings in the time limit, but it's pretty generous for the most part. However, you do have somebody chasing you the entire time, and you're never going to guess who that person is. Why? If you couldn't see him there, It's Zero. Remember the guy from Sonic Adventure 1 who was chasing Amy? I thought Amy killed him. Oh well. He's there for some reason. And you basically just got to collect all the rings from that time, but as you can see, it's not very challenging. But yeah, it is annoying to get here, and you have to redo it if you fail, so that sucks major ass. And to make this even worse, much like in Sonic Advance 1, collecting all the rings and 7 Chaos Emeralds does not make you turn into Super Sonic. It only unlocks the final boss of the game, which is kind of lame, let's be honest. Where's the Super Sonic? Come on, where is the Super Sonic? Our first level is Leaf Forest. Leaf Forest is basically your starter Green Hill area with, you know, basic stuff. Maybe it's kind of jungly. Here's me first playing the game, like thinking maybe I could use my bounce brace to get up there. I couldn't. But yeah, this level is pretty basic when it comes to overall level design. It has 3 badniks. We've seen 2 of them before, the Buzzer and the Kiki, but we got one new. This is Mon. Mon is looks like a Kiki. He's an orange monkey, but what he does, he just jumps up and down. Yeah, they suck. So when playing Sonic Advance 2, you'll notice quite a few different changes from Sonic Advance 1. Mostly, these levels are a lot bigger. However, I don't think that makes this game much better than Sonic Advance 1. At first, it felt pretty cool. Sonic has a lot of new animations, and his sprite work is amazing. The way you play as him, and his speed is pretty cool. However, you're playing on a smaller screen, so you can't see as far ahead. So playing a game that's about speed and going fast, well, the levels are bigger. There's a lot less in them compared to Sonic Advance 1, which felt more similar to the previous Sonic classic games, Sonic 1, 2, and 3. So, well, Sonic Advance 2 feels like its whole own beast, despite the fact it has similar mechanics and such. But the level design is much around trying to get through the upper levels and going hitting the right areas, sort of like the boost to win games in the future. I know it's called boost to win, they're not really like that. And yeah, because of that, the levels can be easy or hard. I find them pretty hard because of the way the level design is. The Leaf Forest is pretty basic. As you could probably see there, Sonic starts off in a running pose for going into the stage, because it's just kind of treated like, oh, yeah, we're speeding running this. There's a lot less platforming stuff, but you will find stuff like this little door knob thing here that you have to bounce on. You'll find stuff like that, but you won't see a whole lot of platforming. You'll have ramps mostly, and springs, and a lot of grind rails, all of which are trying to take you to the right, which is fine by me. But it is weird, there's a lot less enemies and a lot less platforming to do in this game as compared to the previous installment. The springs, though, work a lot better than they did in Sonic Advance 1. I had a little problem where I couldn't hit them sometimes, even though it wanted me to hit them, so I had to jump on them at a weird angle. Here, that's not a problem. And yeah, Sonic Advance 2 is fun. However, you're going to see later, after Leaf Forest, that this game is going to get kind of annoying with some of its design choices. But Leaf Forest is pretty basic, barely any enemies, except for these weird red things that appear. These weird red swirly things will appear throughout the entire game, and they will take some trial and error to do. Now, some of you people think this looks familiar. Well, you probably have played Sonic Ultimate Flash, which uses elements from this game. This is not an official Sonic game, it's a fan-made game, but a lot of people, including me, have played it. In fact, I played Ultimate Flash Sonic before I even played any of the advanced games, since I just didn't have them at the time. But I did have a computer, and I did find this game. I was like, this game's pretty cool, even though the compression of the audio is terrible. But yeah, this Ultimate Flash game is pretty unique, actually. The most obvious thing about it is the fact that, it's not compressed. The screen's wider. But yeah, Ultimate Flash, if you played it, then it pretty much takes elements from Sonic Advance 2. And that's all I gotta say about that. Let's move on back to the regular game. Act 3 of all the levels, or the zones, you will, is a boss fight. So the boss fight here is Egg Hammer Tank 2? Is that what the official name is? Apparently, 2. It's kind of confusing. It's all like lumped together. Anyway, every boss fight is similar in Sonic Advance 2. You basically are running in an area where Eggman's like there of a machine, and you gotta avoid it while also collecting some of the rings. You don't get a whole lot of rings, but you do get unique ones, so you can always recollect some, because every time you get hit, you pretty much lose all your rings. Eggman's holding Cream the Rabbit, and you gotta hit him without avoiding the hammer. Now, this boss fight is the easiest in the game, but still kind of challenging. Actually, getting up there, you lose your momentum every time you go back, and then building it up, and it's just hard to avoid it. Just every attack the Eggman or whoever does, it's just not that fun to do, to be honest. Uh, so I don't really know how to describe it unless you played it. But yeah, running against it is different, not fun. But this one is luckily not too hard, and after a couple of hits, you will defeat Eggman. Keep in mind, he does get a little tougher near the end of his fights, where he'll change little forms, basically. Like, he'll do more rapid attacks or different types of attacks. But here, Egg Hammer Tank 2 is pretty easy. There are cutscenes in this game, but there's not a whole lot. For example, this cutscene is Cream thanking Sonic for saving her, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever, I gotta go, bye bye." And Cream, I guess, follows after him. Well, not really, because the characters don't follow each other in this game. But Cream's like, "I'm gonna help Mr. Sonic out." That's what you call Sonic, and see if I can find my mom, because her mom's missing. Remember her mom, Vanilla? And yeah, you can play as. Our next zone is Hot Crater Zone. Hot Crater is, well, hot if you couldn't tell, but that's not all there is to it. Hot Crater doesn't really have anything too unique for it compared to the previous zone, or than aesthetically speaking. It doesn't feel as different. There isn't like any like dickish level designs elements just yet. It's pretty basic. We got all your springs. You've seen a lot of loop-de-loops, a lot of grind rails, and a lot of downward slopes. But we do have a couple of badniks here. We actually got four. We got the Gula, which you've seen multiple times before in this franchise, the Fire, Orbinaut, and everything else seems to be new enemies. So let's go over. First, we got a Kora Kora, I believe is what's called. Yeah. No, Kora. Just Kora. Sorry, there's another enemy called Kora Kora. These are little turtle guys who have springs on their back. Essentially, we've seen these type of enemy before in previous Sun games where you just jump on top of them and they spring you all the way to the top. And sometimes these guys can be flying in the air, but they work basically the same thing. They're pretty basic enemies. You can defeat them by rolling into them, but yeah, they're nothing too challenging. This is Kora Kora. It's a little octopus squid thing that has a little fireball and it kind of swings it a little bit. It's not really a challenging enemy at all. You'll barely see it, so. This is Cubanaga. Lovely name. It's a little worm guy that come out of little holes in the walls and the ceilings and floors, and they'll try to shoot projectiles. They're not very challenging. Most of these enemies aren't challenging, so there's not a whole lot of them. You'll basically run past them for the most part, even though you have a lot of options to defeat them now with all your move sets, but they're not really that useful because, like I said, you'll be running past most of the enemies in this game. Despite how dangerous it looks, this level is actually pretty basic and easy. It has most of the same Sonic elements you've seen before. Tubes, you will see a couple enemies, but they're pretty easy to pass and defeat. And everything else is pretty basic. You got red rings you can jump through, but that's not a unique level. Most of the platforming gimmicks don't really transfer to level. They're mostly just the same things we've seen over and over again. And this level is no different. This level is pretty basic. It's pretty easy for the most part. It basically eases you into the gameplay style of Sonic Advance 2 before it throws all the hell at you during later levels. One of the most unique things about Sonic Advance 2 that I didn't mention before is the way the level ends. You got this track area, and you got to land on a certain spot based on how fast you're going. But they pretty much want you to land on the first thing you see, right? Even though there's a lot more of that than they are the little tiny spots at the end. But who cares? So yeah, Hot Crater isn't too much of a challenging level, though it is weird that it looks like it's on fire the whole time, especially for a second level. Like, geez Louise, like why does this level look so dangerous? There is Bombless Pits. Keep in mind, this is the first level to have that. And there's also these hooks that are also kind of suck ass. They don't really work that well, especially whenever you see them. You gotta get momentum to get them. But sometimes before you see them, be like, oh, there it is. Unless you know they're there beforehand, you're not gonna be able to hit them. That's another problem with this level. It's not a terrible level, but overall, it's not the most unique level in the world. It's on fire. It's like, oh, this feels like a level you see later in the game, but nope, it's the second level in the game. Boss here is known as the Egg Bomber Tank. This guy can be a pain in the ass, basically. Unless you learn the pattern, which took me a while to do, because you're so easy to die here, then you're not going to be able to do this the first time around. Like I said, the boss fights are pretty challenging in this game, mostly because of the running section. Eggman's going to be shooting bombs at you at different angles, and once you figure out the pattern, you can do it fine, but for a first time, it's not too easy, and you can't get as much hits as you can in previous Sonic games with Eggman because of the way you're running. Make matters worse, once you've hit it multiple times, he goes in this form, which is kind of even harder because he shoots out really fast egg bombs that make you die. Once you learn the pattern, though, you can do it, and it only takes a couple more hits after that to defeat Egg Bomber Tank. This guy drained a lot of lives out of me, let me tell you something. The next zone in Sonic Advance 2 is probably the most popular zone in the Sonic Advance series, being Music Plant Zone. This is basically a crazy, colorful underworld. Kind of reminds me of Music Park from Mario Kart, if anyone knows that level. Probably, because everyone plays Mario Kart. But anyway, Music Plant is a pretty fun level, where all these symbols and all these piano keys and all this stuff are basically what Sonic's bouncing on, creating a very unique level environment, the most unique in the game, because, most of the time they share the same elements. But here, we got to bounce on piano keys, bounce on tambourines, and all sorts of other unique elements. And the level is just crazy, kooky, and a lot of fun. So yeah, you can tell why this is a fan favorite just by looking at it. It's pretty fun. And also, you get shot out of a flute. The first Badnik is Bell. Bell is the most useless Badnik in the world as it does nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're just getting in the way, I guess. Circus is a little monkey guy juggling a ball around, and that's all they do is they juggle balls. You gotta avoid the ball and hit them and release the animal inside of them. Pico Pico is a little clown bandit that has a big hammer that starts to swing at Sonic and friends. They're not too challenging. Like I said, you're not going to find a lot of enemies in Sonic Advance 2 because of the way the levels are structured. Yato is a little hermit crab guy. We've seen enemy types like this before. They hide in their shells and they're invulnerable. You only hit them by rolling into them, but they also, when they peep out, can shoot a projectile at you. So keep in mind, these guys can be the only tricky enemy in the whole level because every other enemy is basically non-existent. Yeah, Music Plant is basically the most unique Sonic level. Pretty much one of the entire Sonic history, to be honest. You won't see another level like this with actually fun mechanics. This is a very well-designed level, the way it is playing through it, and just a fun atmosphere. I don't think there's any bombless pits like there was in the previous zone either, which makes it pretty good. Honestly, I don't know why they didn't make this stage 2, but then again, sometimes Sonic level placements don't make sense. We've been through this multiple times. Like why Starlight Zone near the end of Sonic's gameplay in Sonic 1 when it's easier than the rest of the zones, and why is Chemical Plant have such a hard second act when it's the second zone of the game and every other zone isn't that hard compared to that. But oh well, that's just life sometimes. But yeah, this level's pretty cool. You can run on the ceiling, which is always a bonus. Running on the ceiling is amazing. For the boss fight, Eggman forgot that this is a music-themed area and just is wearing a weird Totem Mega Man-style boss fight here, where essentially you gotta jump on these platforms that are also shooting projectiles at you. It's not the worst boss fight in the game, since you, like I said, it's easier to get to the boss, but still, the fact that they're trickier to jump on than they look, and the projectiles they shoot out, with already having spikes on the side, make these guys a little annoying. However, once you get to the rhythm, you can jump on Eggman and free your little buddy Tails, who, as you can see, is crying for dear life. Because the funny thing about this boss fight is that the second part actually makes it easier because he shoots them out more rapidly, makes it easier to actually jump on top of Eggman, which is what you want to do the entire time. You don't want to be running back, you want to be up in front and hitting that fat Eggman in his fat face, or Robotnik, whatever you prefer to call him. I call him Eggman just because he's an egg-shaped man. We get another cutscene. This time, Sonic's like, I wonder what Eggman's playing. Bye, Tails. And Tails like, wait for me. Yeah, these cutscenes aren't very great, if you couldn't tell by the lack of actual things going on in them. The next zone after this is Ice Paradise Zone. You'll probably recognize this zone for being in Ultimate Flash Sonic, as I mentioned already before. And a lot of people have played that game, even if they haven't played Sonic games before. This zone has a couple of ice mechanics, but nothing too difficult. It's actually easier than Ice. Was it Ice Cap? Was it called Ice Cap in Sonic Advance 1? I forgot completely. And yeah, essentially you're running through an ice in this area of city in the background with some upbeat, good music there, and all this other good stuff. There is some basic ice physics that make you kind of slide forward, but it's pretty basic. There's bombless pits here, but overall you're basically doing most of the same things you've done in the other zones here, just with ice themed. Our first new Badnik's Balloon. He kind of floats there and shoots projectiles at you. Nothing too unique here, so let's go past him. Hammerhead's a pretty interesting guy. It's a little hammerhead shark that kind of acts as a platform more than anything that can sink down if you lay on it too long. Though this guy seemed pretty interesting, but there's actually not a whole lot of them in the game, so you kind of forget that you're even there, even though they have a pretty interesting game. And lastly, we got Pen, who was in Sonic Advance 1, so I don't want to go over this guy. This time he kind of rockets towards you instead of throwing projectiles at you, and there you go. Like I said, Ice Paradise doesn't have too much going for it compared to the other levels. Most of the levels are mostly play the same for the most part, with slightly increase in difficulty in each one, more than unique level gimmicks here. There will be some ice slides and stuff like that, but other than that, you're not going to see crazy ice mechanics or anything like that. And the ice slides themselves just make you go forward anyway, so it's not a big deal. So yeah, overall, it's a nice stage with a cool aesthetic. Get it? So let's go on to the boss. The boss fight here is known as Arrow Egg. This boss fight is a pain in the ass. You gotta jump on this platform here that always flips over occasionally while Eggman shoots rockets at you. This is just really annoying. You can get the pattern down at some point, but just running up there, it's just, I don't like running up there in these boss fights. It's tedious. That's why I'm not a big fan of these running boss fights. They look cool, but in practice, they aren't that great to play as. Having Sonic go back to the left screen because he messed up the pattern here of jumping over the things because I accidentally did a wrong maneuver because for some reason Sonic thought it'd be a good idea to do a homing attack there for some reason. Like, what are you homing attack onto? That's what I want to know, Sonic. Yeah, either way, this boss fight is just plain old annoying. There is no strategy for me really to describe to you. Just gotta run and make sure you collect all your rings and stuff like that, and then you'll be able to defeat the fat man himself. All right. The next zone is Sky Canyon Zone. This is when stuff can get a little, as I call it, tricky-dicky. Because you can tell by this level name, we're in the sky, meaning that, yes, there's the bottomless platforms are finally here. They were in the previous zones, however, this time they're here with a vengeance. Die Hard with a vengeance, to be exact. And yeah, there's some areas in levels, parts, where you're basically going to find yourself falling, even if it doesn't, the level design doesn't really make much sense in that regard. The most big thing without this level is that they love these little weird fan things you're going to hit constantly. Like here. You see that? I fell to my death because I accidentally went forward because most of the gameplay tells you to go forward all the time. But there it's like, nope, you missed that one spring because you decided to do a trick. Fuck you, game. Yeah, Sky Canyon basically says, if you got this far, you gotta master this gameplay controls because we're gonna F with you. Basically, yeah, this level has a lot of things that will kill you, basically. Not so much the enemies itself, but more so the level design. It's not bad, but like I said, if you don't remember these patterns or level elements, you're going to get messed with. There's a lot of air gimmicks, a lot of fans that sometimes are a little confusing if you don't know what they do the first time. Essentially, they'll shoot you in different directions depending on what angle you hit them at. Sometimes that actually can kill you if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't get enough speed during them. Like this little guy here almost died there. You gotta spin dash into them in order to get what you want. Once you figure it out, it's not bad, but newcomers, it's gonna be like, what? How did I do that? Sort of thing. Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff in this zone, including a bunch of bouncy platforms over a bottomless pit. This area is a lot harder than it actually looks, to be honest. Uh, what I figured it out, but at first I was like, what? Okay, that's kind of annoying. But yeah, this level kind of adds trial and error to your gameplay, as well as having very little badniks. I did mention them, yeah, I forgot to mention them. There's Buzzer and two new ones. There's Modillo. Modillo's an armadillo guy, and it rolls around. And basically, you gotta hit it when it's not rolling around. Pretty basic. This is Straw. It's a hummingbird style badnik that's very small and will dive down to Sonic. I got hit by these guys like one time, and that's about it. They're not very tough. The boss here is incredibly annoying. This is the Egg Saucer. For some reason, Knuckles is piloting it. This plot did say he got kidnapped, so maybe he's mind controlled to do this, but at the cutscene next, like, oh, he was tricked by Eggman again. I have no idea why would do that. There's no Master Emerald in this game, so Knuckles is just a complete fucking idiot in this game, apparently. Whatever. This boss fight, we got three things: a laser and a hand. The hand is incredibly annoying because even though there's rings and stuff like that, you have to avoid its slap, because if it slaps you, well, at the right angle, well, you will instant die. I'm not joking, especially since it makes it hard to actually hit the guy you're trying to hit, which is Knuckles. The laser beam is pretty easy to get rid of, though that one can be annoying as well. But that hand can go give itself a hand job. That's all I can say about that hand. After a lot of trial and error of this boss fight, getting the right jumps on Knuckles, I was able to defeat this boss and show Knuckles what I'm made of. And the last enemy here is Star. Star is not a star. It's just a circle of spikes now near it, making it look like a star. It tries to camouflage itself, and you can't hit it like that, and then it will try to shoot out at Sonic. And these guys appear quite a lot, so they're quite annoying. I recommend just avoiding these guys, dealing with them. Alright? Technobase has a lot of elements that make it a lot difficult than the other levels. We'll have areas where if you will get launched by these green cubes, and you might land on the wrong spot here and fall off because you weren't aware that that was going to happen, because you had to have a split-second reaction time in order to figure that out. Stuff like that is very common in Technobase, but overall, once you learn the patterns, which is what this game wants you to do, learn the layouts, alright? Learn the layouts. You will be fine. I haven't played Sonic Advance 2 as much as the other games in the franchise, so I don't know the layouts as well. So going here, I was like, what the hell is going on? There's basically just this level will tell you is that you feel like you're playing normally, like, alright, everything's going fine, hunky-dory, I'm going for the levels, going for the bumpers, I'm going for all the springs, I'm going for all the loopy-loops, and then you'll find an area where all of a sudden you'll be screwed over, and you can't either go back or you'll just die because there's a bottomless pit there, and you weren't even aware of that bottomless pit. There was no warning, no second chance. Though the boss fight here isn't too difficult, or in fact there's a lack of rings. Eggman's got a couple platforms here spinning around, and you gotta get in rhythm, avoid the spikes and everything else they have there, and then eventually you'll defeat him. Not too difficult, but it is kind of difficult. The running isn't as important here, so it doesn't really affect it. So yeah, this boss fight, I would say, is actually kind of easier than some of the other earlier ones. Our last zone is Egg Utopia Zone. The first one is Geiju, who will appear in corridors and just jump up in between the ceiling and floor and wall and all sorts of stuff like that. They can be annoying and they will be in your way, so you gotta try to hit them in the head or just avoid them or just run past them. The mouse is a little guy. He's called Mouse. He'll go up forward and backwards on the floor, and we'll see Sonic will charge towards him pretty fast. So yeah, keep an eye out for these little buggers. Eggiotopia Zone is actually based off the Sonic Adventure 2 level Crazy Gadget, as well as some elements from, I guess, Final Rush, maybe? I'm not sure. But yeah, you basically are going out into space sometimes in grind rails, and which, of course, there's bottomless pits there, or bottomless space pits, if you will, as well as the fact that there are gravity elements, which actually makes the stage kind of neat. So yeah, sometimes you'll go across the area level and you'll be upside down. It actually makes the stage feel pretty cool. And Sonic used to have gravity elements. There's a lot of these weird poles. I'm not sure what the poles are for. Get rid of these poles, as well as the fact we got some platformers. Platformers. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Grind rails. There's all sorts of stuff here. This level definitely tests your patience because there is a lot of stuff going on here, and basically your skill, I should say, not patience. There's like no patience testing here. Basically, you got to figure out, you got to master all the controls of Sonic Advance 2 during this level because there's a lot more obstacles and enemies here. Well, nothing too unique that we haven't seen before. There's the Buzzer and Spinner, which are enemies we've seen multiple times before in this franchise already, but we have 2 new enemies. So yeah, this zone is challenging. However, if you give it some trial and error, you should be able to do it just fine. And once you do that, you'll finally be able to face off against the Fat Man himself. The boss fight here is known as the Egg Frog. Eggman will jump up and down between the ceiling and floor, as well as Sonic himself is avoiding the missiles. This boss fight is quite annoying if you don't know how to do it. Basically, you gotta aim your jumps and stuff like that between the gravity while avoiding his attacks, especially those bombs, which have a very high radius, and the rings are a little trickier to get, especially when you're trying to figure out the gravity mechanics of it all. Though, if you're an expert, you should be able to do it. I'm not an expert, so I had trouble doing it, but if you are an expert, you'll be able to do it. And we go to the map and we get to XX. So now it's double X. I hope the next game doesn't have triple X because that'd be a little too scary. This zone decides that, you know what, let's have you fight all the same annoying bosses you already defeated before. So yeah, we have to go for everyone. The Egg Hammer Tank 2, Egg Bomber Tank, Egg Totem Tank, Arrow Tank, and Egg Saucer, Egg Go Around, Egg Frog. All of them in a row. Like, are you kidding me? They're actually less challenging than they were before, so they have less hits, but still, that's incredibly annoying. So yeah, not only does this game have the worst boss fights in my opinion in the Sonic franchise, but you have to fight them again twice in a row. Jeez Louise, have mercy. This wouldn't be too hard. You have to play as Cream, who has her Chow attack, which makes some of these boss fights super easy. But no, you have to play as every character minus Amy, because Amy's the last character you unlock. But yeah, Sonic, Tails, Cream, and Knuckles have to fight all these fights, and yeah, it sucks. It sucks major ass. At the end, you'll get to the actual boss fight. Super Egg Robo Z. Now, this guy can be easily cheesed, haha, get it, with Cheese, the Chow, but without him, you have to fight him by yourself. Overall, it's pretty easy because you don't have to deal with a lot of the bullshit that were in the other boss fights with the running. All you gotta do is jump on his hands and avoid the platforms, which, as you can tell, is not very hard at all. Like really at all. You just gotta be patient. And there you go. I guess you can avoid that big laser at the top, but that's kind of difficult. But really, it's not. It's pretty easy. And once you defeat its arms, you gotta jump into its head, which is not challenging really either. It's more of a patience and waiting game. Despite how intimidating this guy looks, he's actually probably the easiest boss fight in the game, which is kind of funny. And that was all the levels that got for final. That's the final level for all the characters. However, if you did not do that, you have gotten all the Chaos Emeralds, right? Well, you get this cutscene where all these birds flying around, and that's Cream's mom, Vanilla, in case you're wondering, and she's getting sucked in by something. And it's very sad, because Cream's looking for her mom the whole game, so she's sad and crying. I'm like, well, my mom. Sonic's like, he's like, this sucks! And they're all sad and crying, I guess, because, this is very sad. Sonic then summons all the Chaos Emeralds he has, and of course he turns into Super Sonic, because this wouldn't be a Sonic game without a Super Sonic boss fight. Well, there's been a couple of Sonic games that don't have a Super Sonic boss fight, but Sonic's going to go into space and defeat Eggman once and for all. In the true Area 53. What does that mean? I do not know. True Area 53? What do you mean Area 53? We're in space. Anyway, here is the final boss of Sonic Advance, being the true Area 53 boss. That's the name. I do not understand the title. Essentially, it's very similar to Sonic Advance 1's boss fight. We're playing Super Sonic. Super Sonic, like it always, has 50 rings, and he runs them out. You gotta collect them. Essentially, you're just charging missiles into the boss fight, and that's about it. He'll shoot stuff at you, which will make Super Sonic go backwards. But yeah, other than that, this is pretty basic. Nothing too challenging here. I mean, what's Eggman gonna do against Sonic? Nothing. I mean, what this boss fight's called True Area 53. What was he thinking with this name? There really isn't much to this boss fight. He shoots stuff at you, and then essentially he'll change the pattern a little bit. There's plenty of rings to collect. It's not very challenging. It's weird the later the boss fights go, the easier they get. But whatever, Eggman does Eggman-like things. After that, a giant capsule falls on top of Super Sonic, and I guess it's really heavy because he seems to have a lot of trouble with it. This is the ending, the cutscene. It started to break apart, I guess. And yeah, all the animals and Cream's mom's there, which is nice and lovely. She's fallen to her death, but Sonic's gonna reach out for her. But can Sonic do? He can't fly, but he does have no fall damage. Remember that. There's a lot of flickies in the air. Well, what will happen? Who will save them? Who's going to save you now? Well, Sonic grabs onto her hand. He's like, wow, if there's a MILF in the series, she'd be it. Yeah, where's the next part of the cutscene? Okay. Sonic, I guess, drops down because, as we all know, Sonic doesn't have fall damage, and that's it. Apparently, that was the whole cutscene. Alright, there's some additional stuff after it. Knuckles has the correct eye color now, and between the credits, we get, like, stuff like here and there. Cream hugs her mom, isn't it lovely? And they all look for something, I guess. I don't know what they're looking for. And I guess Vanilla's thankful that Sonic saved her, and then Sonic's just running away because he's like, fuck this shit. Thank you for playing. Anyway, let's go over the alternate endings. Sonic does not collect 7 Chaos Emeralds. The thing falls down. He looks super cool. Like, yeah, I just feed Eggman. Take that, you faker. Also, his shoes are missing the soles. The thing explodes, by the way, on Planet Mobius, so that's kind of dangerous there, Sonic. So keep that in mind. And yeah, he just goes around with all the birdies, and everyone's celebrating. And he's like, yep, that's my game. Thank you for playing. Honestly, that ending's better because it's not weird like the final ending. Tails' ending has him flying for the sky as also. All these characters just love to fall out of the sky as the base falls down to the background. It's pretty much the same as Sonic's. He just goes around with all the little animals and then jumps in the screen, much like Sonic does. Nothing too exciting here. Knuckles' ending is pretty much the same as the other two. He falls out of the sky, the base explodes behind him. All the animals are around him, and he punches the screen in the face. Cream's ending is also the same. She falls out of the sky, and she finds her mom right there. Isn't that lovely? She didn't have to look very far, and she jumps in the screen and gives us a high five. Or maybe she's about to slap us. Who knows? As to hold down her skirt, she falls in the sky, hopes that no one looks up it. That's kind of a big problem. She's also hanging out with the animals, and I guess she gives us a high five too, maybe? Oh yeah, she's giving us a backhand. And that's all the endings. While these endings aren't the greatest in the world, they make more sense than the final ending, which has, like, how did Sonic just fall that far down and just not deal any damage? I know we've seen that before, but geez Louise. And that was Sonic Advance 2. There are a little other stuff here, but most of it's the same from Sonic Advance 1 to mention. It has time trials and multiplayer mode, stuff I can't really showcase, as well as some optional changes. Nothing too big here. And a little sound test. I'll go over the sound test a little bit, but anyway, Sonic Advance 2 is definitely a unique game experience. It's up in the air what you prefer better, Sonic Advance 1 or 2. I'm more Advance 1 kind of guy. While Sonic Advance 2 does fix some things and has some better graphics, it looks graphically better, superior to Sonic Advance 1. Because the gameplay mostly plays the same throughout most of the levels, and the challenge is up by a lot. It's not unfair, but it doesn't feel totally fair compared to other games. In what comes to the challenge of the game, sometimes it feels a little too bullshit. The boss fights, I'm not a big fan of, so I do not prefer Sonic Advance 2 over its previous installment, but I can see why someone would. It has a good sense of speed, but there's not a whole lot of platforming in this game compared to the others in the franchise. Of course, it's just the second one in the franchise. We got a third one to go over, but we actually got some games between Sonic Advance 1, 2, and 3, unlike Sonic Advance 1 and 2, which had no games in between. The sound test, instead of having Amy playing maracas, it has Cream playing on a tambourine, and that's pretty much the only difference here. She looks really into it, though. Sonic Advance 2 also has the Chani Chowgurn, but you have to beat the game in Final Zone, as well as collect 7 Chaos Emeralds, which is kind of annoying. But you do have new minigames, while it works mostly the same as Sonic Advance 1. One of the first minigames is that Cream is shooting Cheese up in the air to get lots of rings. It kind of seen this type of minigame before. It's pretty basic, but hey, it works better than some of the other ones, the previous games. At least it's kind of clear what we're doing here. Yeah, that's about it for this minigame. It's just collect rings and try not to let cheese fall on his precious little blue head. As this minigame goes on, you'll find more challenges, like there's red balloons, and the rings get higher, all sorts of other things like that. And yes, you can have him land on top of Cream's head, which is kind of funny, actually. And that's pretty much it. The other minigame is basically the same, it's just they have this new one, which is kind of neat and all. And there's very, very minor changes, like the Chows can have a Z's when they sleep. And that's about it when it comes to Tiny Chow Garden. Tiny Chow Garden is just a way to transfer chows between games anyway, so it's nothing that big a deal anyway, so who cares? ソニックと一緒ならソニックと一緒ならできる行くぜソニックアドバンス2今ならソニックスーパーシールイン Sonic Advance 2, of course, was released on the Game Boy Advance, and it goes for around $27, which isn't too bad, actually. Complete, it's going to be a lot more because it's a box. It's around the same price as Sonic Advance 1. It's not too expensive, but it's not the most common game in the world. It isn't actually rare, I don't know what I'm talking about. But this is the only way you can play this game if you're playing in America, unless you use emulation, which I guess there's nothing wrong with that because they won't release it here in North America because I mentioned it in Sonic Advance 1 video of weird publishing rights. And Advance 2 has been released in different formats, but only in Japan. The now closed Wii U Virtual Shop had GBA games. In Japan, it had all the Advance games, as well as Advance 2 being on mobile devices. But yeah, unfortunately, they can only play that in Japan, so, and the Wii U Shop's down now, so the only way you can play this game really is emulation, and getting a Game Boy Advance or DS that plays GBA games. Sonic Advance 2 I ranked lower than Sonic Advance 1 for the reason of its challenge, and it doesn't have as much charm as Sonic Advance 1. Having Amy as a final unlockable character is kind of lame, honestly, and it has some of the same problems Sonic Advance 1, bomb splits, more so, as well as having to play as every character in the game, which I don't complain about in Sonic Heroes as much, because at least you get a unique story, but Sonic Advance 2 tries to have a story, but kind of fails miserably at it. It's like, I kind of wish they just didn't do it, because it kind of makes you wish there's more. Like, Knuckles being tricked by Eggman here in a very vague way just doesn't really work that well, especially in this point in the timeline. Like, geez Louise. Other than that, I just the endings aren't as charming as Sonic Advance 1, as well as the gameplay. I'm not as big a fan of the design choices. There are some great improvements in some areas, but overall, I think Sonic Advance 1 was a more polished game when it comes to Sonic Advance 2. Now, if you prefer Advance 2, I can understand that. However, I'm in the Advance 1 camp. The Music Plant, pretty good. Now, I know I'm not sure how controversial that is. I know every Advance fan has their own favorite one, but Advance 1, I think, is probably going to be my favorite one, depending on what happens when I play Sonic Advance 3. Thank you for watching, and we won't be doing Advance 3 in a little while. We got a couple more games in the way. Thank you for going to my channel and all those sorts of stuff like that. And yeah, I love you.